Hey, Daddy, this is the man of the champions, Bill Fonzie Alfonso, giving a shout out to something else. Something else, Daddy.
This is Nickel Matan, Great Warrior Wolf, and you are listening to Something Else.
I'm Tony Cini, and you're listening to Something Else.
Hey everybody, it's Rich Palladino, the voice of New England, and you are listening to Something Else with Aria.
And welcome to episode number 182 of Something Else. Feast your ear holes in this week's episode as we take a look at NWA Total Nonstop Action, episode number 40 from April 9th, 2003. My name is Aria, and joining me, as always, is the Brian Sweeney to my Mike Barton. It's Cindy. Cindy, how are you today?
Who the hell's Brian Sweeney?
He's the guy that was in Sonny Siaki's corner.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yes. We finally get a payoff on that TNA charity auction.
That is the third payoff, and I think, as we talked about earlier, that is the last payoff.
No, I seem to recall there's like a mayor or something who was the person that won the auction to announce a match with Tenay and Don West. So I'm pretty sure we get at least one more of these things.
Okay. I also want to bring something up special for this match, this show. You know how I talk about how TNA Plus needs to start uploading Explosion from 2003? Because we probably thought this was lost media or something.
I don't know if we thought they should upload Explosion, but you definitely, for some reason, really want them to. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, there was a good reason why, because they announced that they're starting to upload stuff from 2003. And around this time, we have the debut of Abyss. Known as The Abyss.
Who is the they that said they're uploading stuff from 2003?
TNA themselves.
Except for Explosion, they have uploaded everything in 2003. They uploaded the pay-per-views forever ago.
Well, they're starting to upload Explosion from 2003.
Okay, then.
And I bring that up because it kind of explains something that happens later on in the show.
Something happens later in the show that explains why TNA Plus is uploading Explosion 2003 here in 2025.
Because we could actually figure out why it happened.
All right, I look forward to your hypothesis as to why. Anywho, so it's April 9th, 2003, and in case you were curious, and for those who know, I am going to WrestleMania next week. However, never fear, we're still going to be here both next week and the week after. Never fear, we are here, and we'll see if I rip out all my hair before my trip to Vegas. Cindy, I don't know if it's a good thing for me to rip out all my hair when, it's thinning out.
I'm not going to go there.
Well, anywho, TNA number 40, April 9, 2003, 72 episodes to go. This week in the Wrestling Observer newsletter, the cable industry estimates that there are approximately 30,000 people who buy TNA pay-per-views. Now, obviously, this is not every week, but those 30,000 people are averaging between 1 and 3 shows a month. And it makes sense because in a year and a half, when they go to monthly pay-per-views, they're pretty much averaging 30,000 buys until they run everybody off.
Mm-hmm.
Also, remember Zach Gowen? He was backstage at this show and did not understand why everybody was giving him the cold shoulder after he signed with WWE after TNA gave him his first national exposure a few months ago.
Um,
Somebody clue him in. Anyway, on to the show. So I don't always point this out, but I might as well, say one good thing about these people every so often. Uh, TNA has done a great job most weeks of starting the show with 4 or 5 minutes of just a video package recapping what's been going on. They didn't do one last week, but they do one more often than not. They did one this week. I'll say that it's better than when they don't do that. So we go to our first match. It is the Sandman and New Jack versus Ron Harris and Don Harris versus the New Church with Jim Mitchell in an Armed Asylum match. Now, this was set up last week when Jim Mitchell offered the New Church to Saturn and Sandman for a six-man tag and was offended when they chose New Jack instead. This was also announced as a 2 versus 2 tag match last week, and somehow it was turned into a three-way this week. Now, in case you're curious, what is an Armed Asylum match? Well, it's just a wacky name for a street fight. Vince Russo has about 3,000 names for street fights, doesn't he?
yep.
Anyway, there are weapons, quote unquote, strategically placed all throughout the building. In other words, there is shit in the ring, on the ramp, and by the SCX locker room. Everyone was bleeding. I'm not sure any of the tables were gimmicked. New Jack flipped Lee off a balcony, and Lee kinda came short of the tables. Thankfully, Lee landed on his feet, so he was able to splat onto them. New Jack then dove off the balcony onto Slash, who somehow ended up on another table. Luckily for the New Church, the only referee was over with Sandman and Ron or Don Harris, and then one of the Harrises pinned the Sandman with an H-bomb. The announcers talked about how New Jack let his partner down by being on the other side of the arena. Keep in mind, he's like 25 feet away. Now, remember last week when I overrated a shockingly similar match? I've regained my sanity. 1.0 out of 10.
It was just a hardcore brawl, blood, mayhem, everything. Two balcony table spots, plunder. The Harris brothers win when they were definitely the odd people out in this match, unless they're gunning for a title shot against Triple X, which makes no sense whatsoever. 2 out of 10, I guess. And by the way, while we're on this tangent, has the Sandman won a match yet in TNA where he was part of the winning fall and not because Saturn won the match?
That is not important. So in the SCX locker room, Bart Gunn is talking about how he knocked out Steve Williams, The Godfather, and Bradshaw. D'Lo stormed in and said he wanted to fight Mike Sanders. Main event, Glenn Gilberti turned and called Chris Harris, of all people, to go get Mike Sanders. No one seemed especially surprised to see Chris there.
Except for Tenay and West, who blew gaskets. No, wait, no, not Tenay, but Don West did.
Well, Bart Gunn, and I imagine Bart Gunn is not, writing his own promos here. Somebody on his behalf is writing promos where he cannot shut up about the Brawl for All, which, as a reminder, happened 5 years ago at this point. 5 years ago. It would be like, I don't even fucking know at this point. It would be like Braun Strowman coming out on SmackDown this week and talking about how, hey, remember when I beat Goldberg for the Universal title?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, Mike Tenay is on the ramp and says that tonight there will be a 4-way tag team match and that the winners become the #1 contenders to the X Division title. What? And then he says that Triple X has asked to be in the match, and if they lose, they must give the winners a tag team title match. What? What? We'll get to that later. Anyway, Mike brings out Hermie Sadler and Jeff Hammond, who are here to announce that Hermie is going to be driving the TNA NASCAR car, and it's just NASCAR crap. Jeff Hammond tries to lead the crowd in a random ass chant, and they had no fucking clue what he was talking about.
What they did say is that Jeff Hammond will actually be doing color commentary for the main event, which was originally a 3-team X Division tag match, which is now a 4-team X Division tag match because Triple X is now involved. And with Hermie Sadler, you know what we get to do now? Because we got to do this when Hermie Sadler brought it up. So let's look up the 2003 NASCAR point standings and see how Hermie Sadler did while driving the TNA car. He started driving this car at the Coca-Cola 600 for Score Motorsports. And the Coca-Cola 600 was the 12th race. So, yeah. I don't know how long the TNA car lasted. I assume it's probably for a couple of weeks before he got a better sponsor, i.e. any other sponsor. So, I will give you, here it is. Guess what position he finished in the Coca-Cola 600?
37th.
Dead last. 43rd.
All right.
And in total points throughout, his best finish was 30th. On the 2003 Subway 500 in Martinsville. Now, during this time, Hermie Sadler was also doing the lower cups, the Xfinity Series. Guess what he did in 2003.
He did not race. I don't know.
He sucked there too.
All right. So that is our this year in NASCAR report. So
yeah, he sucked so bad that Pontiac quit NASCAR.
So Raven, Alexis Lurie, and Julio, no last name, came into the ring and went into the SCX locker room. Don West somehow knew who Julio was. I guess he was on that one time, like 6 weeks ago, wrestling Raven. Dusty Rhodes was on the interrogation this week. I wrote he may be drunk. And the thing I got from this is that the Sandman told him how to roll his own tobacco.
I got another thing out of this. And I thought about you when he said it. Because when we were doing the Best Damn Wrestling, the Best Damn specials, you went on a pretty darn good rant about Dusty around this time. Being self-aggrandizing and all that fun stuff.
Uh-huh.
The last thing he said in this interrogator segment made me think, yeah, Aria's got a point. He said...
Not just the thing on top of my head.
Nope. Dusty at the end of the interrogator said, when the NWA world title was mentioned, he'd be like, man, wouldn't it be something that a 50-year-old man become heavyweight champion one last time? Only kidding, Jeff. Not really. That made me think we might have a Jeff Jarrett Dusty Rhodes match later on, which doesn't happen, but
Spoiler alert, Dusty Rhodes will challenge for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship on this show this year. Anyway, we then get our main event of the show and the second match of the show. It is Brian Lawler versus Dusty fucking Rhodes in a ladder match. Which, in case you think, hey, this might be one of those WWE TLC matches, which is basically just a weapons match where first pin wins. Nope. This is a true ladder match. They hang a championship cummerbund above the ring, and you have to climb the ladder to get it. And in case you haven't been listening or can't figure it out, they're hanging up David Flair's replica NWA title that he stole from Ric Flair. Now, before we get into the amazingness of this match, stop for a minute and think about this. Dusty Rhodes is so offended that David Flair is bringing out the replica belt that Ric Flair was given, that he wants to steal it and keep it for himself. Because the story is not Dusty wants to get the belt and return it to his good friend Ric Flair. No, he wants to take the belt for his own, and to have as his own little trophy to go along with whatever other trophies he already has at home. Anyway, so whoever hung up this ladder or hung up the belt is an idiot, because the point is you're supposed to hang the belt facing the hard camera. Instead, they hung up the belt backwards, so when they zoom in on it, we're looking at the snaps on the back of the belt. So Brian hit Dusty with a ladder about 30 seconds in. Somehow Dusty did not start bleeding yet. He got hit a second time, which Dusty took to lay down, get his blade out, and is now wearing the Crimson Mask. And I would like to point out, they had one ladder for this match, one full-size ladder. And I guarantee, because it did not break because, Dusty went face first off of it. They gave these two a broken ladder to use.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was wondering, when they did the intros, they didn't have the ladder standing up in the aisle like every other ladder match you ever see. It was laying down on the ground. And suddenly I could see why, because the fucking thing was broken and they couldn't even go out and get a second fucking ladder for this match. Brian tries to climb the broken ladder and time stands still as he tries to climb that fucking thing. And I'm like, how the hell are they going to make Dusty climb this? Dusty gets knocked off and ran into Dusty's elbow a few times. So Rhodes went outside and grabbed a step ladder and began. Yes. He got a step ladder and began hitting Brian with it. Things you never thought you would see. Dusty Rhodes hitting people with a ladder. Dusty Rhodes, set up the ladder in the ring. He then climbed to the very top of the ladder. And when I say the top of the ladder, I don't mean the top rung. I mean he climbed above the top rung and was now standing on top of the ladder. Yes, if you think about it, the number of people who've ever stood on top of a ladder on pay-per-view, Jeff Hardy, and now Dusty Rhodes. Dusty Rhodes from the top of the ladder leaped off with a huge elbow drop on Brian Lawler. Now, before you think that I might be drunk or might be hallucinating, while everything I've told you is technically correct, what happened was he jumped off the step ladder.
When I saw Dusty pull out the step ladder, I immediately thought, oh my God, he isn't going to do it, is he? Then he climbs the step ladder. I'm like, holy crap, he's going to do it. And then he did it. That is probably the highest Dusty Rhodes has been in a wrestling ring after the year 1974.
Now, keep in mind that ladder was as high as the middle rope. So it's like, Dusty Rhodes did an elbow off the middle rope, basically. So Dusty started climbing the real ladder. I got pulled off the first rung of the ladder. Brian goes for the hip hop drop, but missed. Put a tape in your VCR because Dusty begins climbing the ladder, the real ladder. He makes it all the way up to the second rung before David Flair runs down and pulls Dusty down and then climbs up to the top. David was at the top of the ladder when Nikita Koloff ran down, threw David off, and literally ripped the belt down. Time stood still while he was up there because he did not, he was clutching onto the top of the ladder, for everything. He was not letting go of the ladder with his other hand. And the thought of using the free hand to unhook the belt did not occur to him at all. And God only knows what would have happened if that goddamn snap wouldn't have broke, because eventually whatever was holding the belt broke, and the belt came down because Nikita did not think to unsnap it. And then Nikita handed the belt to Dusty, which should not have been considered the win, but was. So Dusty Rhodes is now your not real NWA World Champion. Yeah. So I guess this is Nikita Koloff's babyface turn, because you recall he was on this show for several weeks as a heel.
I think there is some sense creeping into Russo at this time. He's like, yeah, we can't have Koloff as a heel. We might as well just make him a babyface and team him back up with Dusty. And that's what happened. And this is Nikita's last appearance in TNA.
Well, we got Mabel's last appearance last week. Now we got Nikita's last appearance this week. And it's Bart Gunn's last appearance this week, too.
Yep.
So, I mean.
But at least unlike Nikita, Mabel and Bart are actually working.
Mabel didn't work.
Yeah, he did.
No, he didn't. He didn't have a match.
No, I meant after they leave TNA. Immediately, he was working Memphis while he was in TNA.
I'm not counting that. I mean, he's working on this show. So Eric Watts ran down, stole the belt, and ran away because somehow, some way, this feud must continue. After the match, Eric Watts ran down. He said that he stole the belt and ran away. Outside the arena, James Storm confronted sleeveless Chris Harris.
Wait a minute. Why you forgot a grade for the ladder match.
2.0 out of 10.
I got 2 grades for this. As an actual match by itself, it's a 3 out of 10. But for sheer entertainment value of the absurdity of it all, 9 out of 10. But the actual grade's a 3.
Match of the year. Match of the year. Match of the year.
Match of the year.
So Chris Harris was outside without a coat on and wearing a shirt with no sleeves. when James Storm was wondering why the hell he was in the SCX locker room. Harris told him off, and then Mike Sanders was there, and so he told Mike Sanders to go talk to Glenn Gilberti. Harris told Mike that no one likes him in either locker room, and Mike Sanders basically told him to fuck off, and Buddy would go see Glenn Gilberti, which sounds like a riveting segment, especially because seconds after Mike Sanders said he would go see Glenn Gilberti came to the ring for our next match as he took on AJ Styles. Now, I didn't know, Sanders was arriving at the building an hour in, and the XCX locker room is right there next to the front door. What the hell took him so long to go in there and see Glenn? But anyway, I like that Vince Russo's theory on making people buy these pay-per-views is booking AJ Styles against people like Glenn Gilberti. AJ went for the springboard 450 splash, but Glenn moved out of the way, double-legged AJ, and scored the fucking pin with his feet on the ropes. The referee thankfully caught Glenn with his feet on the fucking ropes, so he restarted the match, and AJ pinned him with the Styles Clash. Now, AJ had the match won. It's important to note AJ had the match won, but he put his feet on the ropes to mock Glenn Gilberti, and the announcers did not pick up on that it was done to mock him. Instead, they were acting like, oh my God, Don West especially was like they should restart the match again. But either way, best Disco Inferno match in the last 5 years. 4.0 out of 10.
It was a 5 out of 10 for me. AJ tried to get a really good match out of Disco, but it was fine. Post-match, though, where it gets interesting. I was telling you
interesting
on Facebook,
being a relative term.
Yeah. Before we do these tapings, me and Arya do talk about the show.
We do?
I said this was the most unintentional, hilarious episode of TNA that I've seen. So, post-match, Disco and referee Mike Posey have words. Posey shoves Disco and bolts up the ramp. Disco attacks him. By the way, when I say Disco, I mean Glenn Gilberti. Glenn attacks
AJ Styles.
Yeah. He attacks Mike Posey on the ramp and starts beating him with a chair. During the beatdown, somebody in the audience yells, "He got knocked the fuck out!" I had to pause the video and I cracked up laughing for about 3 minutes. There are so many unintentional bits of humor in this episode, and that was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, Tenay is bitching about needing a commissioner for this show. Once again, you should have paid Bullet Bob that extra $50 that he was asking for. This is your fault.
You were saying you, Mike Tenay, not Dixie Carter or, Janice or anything.
Whoever's in charge of the money.
So Glenn Gilberti just got done beating up a referee. When we go to the back, where Glenn Gilberti gets more TV time, as he tells Mike Sanders that D'Lo Brown is a screw-up, and since he, Glenn Gilberti, was handpicked by Vince Russo, Sanders needs to go kick D'Lo Brown's ass.
And Sanders like, let me get my gear on and I'll do it.
And he's like, sure, bro. Sure. So then we get Sonny Siaki and Desire with Brian Sweeney versus David Young and Athena in a mixed tag team match. Now, as we kind of spoke at the beginning, if you were wondering who the fuck Brian Sweeney is, he's the guy that won the TNA charity auction like 6 months ago, and one of the prizes was to walk to the ring with Sonny Siaki. You have never seen a less charismatic person in your life. Now, I do hear, because if you recall, They had a lot of different prizes that you could bid on. And I hear that the person who won the round of golf with Kurt Hennig is still waiting to this day for to have that round of golf with him.
Will you stop?
I will do no such thing. Before the match, Sonny cuts a promo saying that David is mad at him because Sonny is so attractive and gets the girls, while David is fat and ugly. Sonny went on to say that this match should be Athena versus Desire, so both guys stepped out. The bell rang, and we were going to have a women's match when David walked back into the ring and gave his best friend of 2 weeks, Athena, a spine buster, turned heel, and joined SEX. Oh, and Desire got the pin. How many girls do you think made fun of Vince Russo when he was a kid? I
All
think
of them.
all of them.
Yeah.
0 out of 10.
Hey, guess what?
What was that?
0 out of 10. Said the same
Yeah.
thing.
But
This is one of the few times we actually agree on a 0 out of 10.
In case you think beating up women has any follow-up, they do not mention until like the last 5 minutes in the show that last week Jeff Jarrett hit Alexis Lurie with a chair. In case you're wondering what the payoff to that was, nothing. Nothing. She was just here this week.
Raven's
Goldilocks.
mind control has powerful anti-pain purposes.
Goldilocks interviewed Perry Saturn, who said that you need to be in 500 fights in order to be tough. In walked Jeff Jarrett, who stole Perry Saturn's TV time. Perry Saturn told him to fuck off, so Bart Gunn attacked Saturn to start their match. So yes, it's time for Bart Gunn versus Perry Saturn. Now, Bart Gunn, as you may have heard, because it's the only reason why he was brought into this territory, he won the Brawl for All. And so here, he did a lot of punching, but then did perhaps the most spectacular move he has ever done in the United States, where in one leap, he jumped to the top rope and hit a huge cross-body block off the top rope. So here's the match. Saturn does a suplex, Bart Gunn does a punch. Saturn does a suplex, Bart Gunn does a punch. Somehow Saturn got busted open, and I think he lost all of his blood.
Yeah, that was a clear 1.5 on the Muda meter.
Saturn, by the way, shows that he is tougher than Godfather, Dr. Death, and Bradshaw put together, as he just stands up from all the punches. It was sold at one point like Bart Gunn broke his hand on Saturn's head, so Saturn slapped on some sort of submission move for the tap out in what turns out to be a loser leaves town match. 3.5 out of 10.
There's another spot in this which I thought was brutal but great at the same time. And it kind of says how powerful Bart Gunn is. Because Bart Gunn went for a vertical suplex and he just held Saturn for like 20-25 seconds. You could see the blood just pouring down Saturn below. When they joke says the blood rushes, when they say the blood rushes to your head, to the top of your head when you're up for a suplex or you're upside down, that's true. This match proves it. I like this bloody affair more than what we had earlier because they bled just by wrestling or punching.
Wrestling, bro.
Yep. 5 out of 10. Like Arya said, Bart Gunn's done. He wrestles for New Japan for the next 2 years, so he's fine.
Yes, he is not have to worry about making a living off working for TNA. Stage, New Jack and Sandman are arguing about losing their match. Someone, possibly Jim Mitchell, threw a fireball at Sandman before New Church beat the heck out of Jack. At one point, someone, and I'm pretty sure it was Sandman, but I am not rewinding anything on this show. But someone just runs out from behind and then runs right by them and runs past them far away down the sideline of the building. Does this mean the New Church are officially heels now? Why do I always have to ask that on this show?
Maybe because I think they're just on their own. They'll beat up anybody. They don't care. They're evil. Depends on your definition, of course. Now we have unintentional comedic line of the night number 3.
So, timeout. All this stuff we have now discussed, that is 1 hour of the show.
Yeah.
We are 1 hour into the 2-hour show with all that stuff we just explained, which feels like it feels like there was more stuff in that 1 hour than you're going to see in the average episode of Raw. And at least on the average episode of Raw, you occasionally get some good matches.
And the best match we saw so far is Perry Saturn versus Bart Gunn.
So, because one cannot grieve forever, it's time for more wrestling. Mike Sanders versus D'Lo Brown, 2 men fighting for the love of the Disco Inferno.
Before we do that, can I go back to the fight before? Unintentional.
Sure, why not?
This is the best one. This is unintentional comedic moment number 3. After the New Church beat up Sandman and New Jack, James Mitchell cackles and they cut to the arena and he goes, "I love the smell of burning flesh in the evening." Like, I cracked up laughing hearing that. It was brilliant. Then we get this match.
They used to write that Mike Sanders was wrestling at half speed. I'm now convinced that half speed is full speed for Mike Sanders.
It is.
So Sanders beats on D'Lo outside the ring for 2 minutes. By the time Mike throws Brown back in, the referee had reached the count of 3. In the ring, Sanders did the wacky D'Lo head bob, which was neither funny nor entertaining. D'Lo blocked the super kick, hit a slam, went for the frog splash, but Sonny Siaki skipped down and crotched Brown. Sanders then got a near fall off of a superplex. Siaki and Desire, who also came out, just stood befuddled, and Brown then scored the pin with the low down. This was a match. After the match, Disco ran down and we get a 3-on-1 beating. So this means that yes, D'Lo Brown is not part of SEX. This means that after weeks of teasing that he wanted to be in the top heel faction that includes Disco Inferno, David Young, Mike Sanders, the Harris twins, theoretically it still includes the Rock and Roll Express. They are too good for D'Lo Brown. And now D'Lo Brown gets to be a babyface because the heels rejected him. D'Lo Brown wins 2.5 out of 10.
4 out of 10 for me. It was a match that happened and was adequate. So we kind of have where we're going for sex. So let's talk about sex. So the stable right now for sex, what we know is an active member of Sports Entertainment Extreme. Disco, Mike Sanders, Sonny Siaki, Desire, the Harris twins, Triple X, and David Young. So 10
Doesn't
people.
that sound riveting? So, despite
June can't come soon enough, I'll say.
I don't know if you can hear the car outside honking. They're not honking because they want to hear us talk about more TNA. So earlier today, Mike Tenay interviewed Trinity. She talked about how she bought a ring, put it in her backyard, and began training. She definitely wrestles like somebody who trained herself, even though like she said, she did train with Amazing Red and the SATs. She bragged about being a stunt double on Daredevil. Kid Cash did a run in on this tape promo with his own chair. By the way, these chairs are much nicer than any other chairs we ever see on the show. Where the hell did these chairs come from?
Aren't Tanay and West
Anyway,
normally sitting in those chairs?
I don't know. There were three of them, so where the hell's the third one coming from?
Well, it's the one that
Eh,
Jeff Hammond's sitting in later on the show.
well, Kid Cash tells Trinity that she used him to get popular with the crowd. Cash said he is forced to wrestle Raven tonight because of her, so she will be out in his corner whether she likes it or not, and that she is not allowed to move a muscle. And that leads to a match that really should not have happened. It is the X Division champion Kid Cash versus Raven. Cash has Trinity, Raven has Alexis and Julio. Now,
When did
for the
Julio
first
join again? Because I think this was
an
Explosion.
hour ago, Julio joined an hour ago when he showed up with Raven and Alexis during the show, and Don West knew who he was.
Is it just because like Don West more tuned to the show than anybody else?
Don West gets all this crap, especially at this time, for not being, a wrestling guy, etc. Well, he was smarter than a lot of fucking people about this shit. By the way, so Borash once again told us that Kid Cash was the reigning and defending champion. He is not defending the title here against Raven, even though Raven did win his X Division debut a few weeks ago against Julio. So in theory, he's in line for a title shot now, especially since Jerry Lynn got his title shot last week. So it was mentioned in a throwaway line that Raven gets his world title match on April 30th. So I want you to keep this in mind. Kid Cash has been X Division champion for about 2 months now. He wrestles almost every week. In fact, he wins almost every week. Raven is the number one contender to the World Heavyweight title, and I don't think he's ever lost a match so far in TNA. So, A, why the hell is this match even happening? And B, why is this match even happening? And C, what the hell drugs were both of these people in or on? Because Raven's the one that gets the blame for all this, because Raven, I guess, had pulled his hamstring. But Raven did not cause Kid Cash to slip off the ropes multiple times. Raven did not cause Kid Cash, to fuck up moves. Raven didn't take a Hurricanrana pretty well, or well at all, until Trinity gave it to him. Go figure. Trinity, who, by the way, was supposed to not move a muscle, spent the entire match pacing back and forth, which Tenay says proves that she's listening to Kid Cash but not moving a muscle. I'm not sure if he knows what a muscle is. And by the way, this match between the number one contender to the world title and the X Division champion is all about Trinity doing her moves. She does give Raven her Hurricanrana. She does a moonsault to Julio and Alexis, and then she storms away, and the cameras almost miss Raven giving Kid Cash the even flow DDT for the pin. This match did nothing for anyone, and it was a bad match to boot.
Yep.
2.0 out of 10.
3.0 out of 10 for me. Just to let everybody know, my scale is a lot different from Arya's, but we both agreed that this match was not good. Like, we talked about how Jerry Lynn versus Kid Cash last week was a match at 70% speed from what these two normally could do. The match against with Kid Cash and Raven was about double speed that these two should do. It was not good, and the setup and the reason this happened is, what are we getting? A Trinity Kid Cash feud, maybe?
Of course.
Can we
All
talk about
right.
the main
So,
event as one of the best palate cleansers in the history of professional wrestling?
yes. So the main event, which by the way, we told you an hour ago, the main event is a four-way X Division tag team match. We told you the Triple X is in the match. Pray tell, until anybody else came out, did you have any idea who the fuck else was in this match?
They no, because they
Uh,
never announced it.
no, they didn't. All you knew is that Triple X is in this match for multiple title shots, and that Jeff Hammond, the NASCAR guy, was going to be at the announce desk. And so the match is Triple X, the tag team champions of the world, Christopher Daniels and Elix Skipper, versus the random ass team of Jason Cross and Shark Boy, versus the random ass tag team of Johnny Storm and the debuting with music Chris Sabin. So yes, Chris Sabin finally debuts with Chris Sabin's theme song. So we finally matched the right song to the right person. Versus Jerry Lynn and Amazing Red. Wow. So just to confirm the stipulations for this match. The winners of this match become the top two contenders to the X Division title. And if Triple X loses, the team that beats them gets a shot at the tag team titles. And I actually wrote originally, the team that beats them wins the tag team titles, which is not true. Or maybe it is true eventually, but at least isn't true for this match. Shark Boy will soon be teaming with New Jack. I am psyched for Shark Boy and New Jack.
Yes,
So
I've
people,
seen this tag. I've seen the New Jack Shark Boy pairing. There's a YouTuber called Ring of the Hawk who, or Marky D123, and he does a lot of TNA videos. And I've seen his Ring of the Hawk episode on New Jack, and I was like, this was hilarious. And I'm
well,
looking forward to the rest of New Jack's run, especially when he's teamed up with Shark Boy.
so people keep tagging themselves in, which makes no sense as this is an elimination match. And in theory, you would want to stay out of the ring as long as possible. And you know who echoed my thoughts on this? Don West, who again has been in wrestling for less than a year. And he points out the stupidity of tagging into this match. Now, for the sake of knowledge, Elix Skipper is the first person that Chris Sabin ever wrestled here in TNA. Jeff Hammond, in the middle of this match, puts over that Hardcore Holly gave him a suplex during a Stacker 2 commercial. Let this be known, this is the second time Hardcore Holly has been referenced in TNA in the past few months.
No,
Uh,
he's not coming. However, I will say that
he is. This is a long, slow build to his one appearance in 2013.
I also want to point out that Jeff Hadman, like a lot of people say that there's a lot of crossover between Southern wrestling and NASCAR, and there is. A lot of NASCAR boys grew up as wrestling fans. Jeff Hammond, for example, mentioned he saw matches with, like, he saw Ric Flair when he was at Ivan Koloff's house in 1975. And Ric Flair had like a 1959 Cadillac or something like that. And he brings up all these other names. So, and then you have Hermie, who's a big wrestling fan himself, which I've talked about this before on the show. If you haven't checked out the Dale Jr. podcast with Hermie Sadler on it, they spend like 10 minutes on his adventures in wrestling. And he is credited by Jarrett as the person who got Impact on the air on Fox Sports Net back in the day. But going back to this match might be the best match of 2003 for TNA. But that's not a high bar.
Well, by the way, before we dive too far into this, Don West in the middle of this match explained another stupid part about this match. Now, until this point, I thought the winners of this match will have a three-way match with Kid Cash for the X Division title. That is not what the stipulation is. The stipulation is that the winning team will have a match with each other, and then the winner of that match will have a match with Kid Cash for the X Division Championship. And also, since they said that that match happens next week, they also say that if Triple X loses, they will also wrestle Triple X next week for the tag team titles. So, yeah. Anywho, we get a lot of dives until the masked luchador runs in, shoves Jason Cross off the top rope. Daniels then pins Cross with a roll of the dice. Everyone hits a big move on everyone else, which concluded with Chris Sabin giving Elix Skipper the catatonic on his knee. The masked luchador ran in and gave Sabin a tornado DDT, so Jerry Lynn pinned Chris Sabin with a cradle pile driver. Welcome to TNA, Chris. No one is allowed to lose clean. At this point, I was pissed because I'm like, okay, we're down to Skipper and Daniels versus Lynn and Red, and here's the finish. The masked luchador will run in, try to give a move to Lynn, miss, hit one of Triple X, so Lynn and Red will get the pin. And I was getting more pissed because this was a really good match between Triple X and Lynn and Red. And I was getting more and more pissed because I'm like, if they just leave these two teams the fuck alone and let them have a really good match, this could be a really good match. But no, we're going to get more bullshit. And then he made even more pissed off because after all that, they didn't have a fucking bullshit finish. Instead, after one hell of, a 5-minute match between the two teams, maybe 4 minutes, Daniels and Red are in the ring. It culminates with a tilt-a-whirl small package by Red to Daniels for the pin. Amazing Red pins Chris Daniels. The crowd loses their shit, and Red and Jerry Lynn will now wrestle each other and wrestle Triple X next week for multiple title shots. So yeah, ends up being a damn good match, especially when it gets down to the two teams, and it gets over with the crowd. So yeah, who needs good wrestling matches? No one wants that. Let me know, the best fucking reaction of anything on this show for the past month has been a tag team match with Triple X versus Amazing Red and Jerry Lynn that had no build, no story outside of these two teams want to wrestle each other. And that got over more than anything else on this show. 9.0 out of 10.
9 out of 10 exactly is what I have it. I didn't mind the luchador thing because I had thought that maybe it was like, I thought it was Trinity under the mask because remember last week the same luchador helped Kid Cash win. But in this match, the Spider Luchador, helped Amazing Red to get to the final to win.
Again, are we sure it was not Fabulous Moolah?
I am positive it wasn't Moolah.
Now, while we don't know if this will ever be brought up again or if we'll ever actually find out who is supposed to be the person under the mask, right now, just one of the security guys is putting on the mask and doing these run-ins. So,
Scott Blonde, maybe. Who knows?
yeah. So you might think that was the main event. You might think, okay, the show is over. You would be wrong because what people buy these shows for is not really good professional wrestling. It's talking. So we go to the back where Eric Watts says that yes, he stole the fake NWA title, but it doesn't mean anything. Jeff has been acting weird, but it's because he's jealous that all the fans and all the wrestlers hate Jeff. Eric talks about being a quarterback at the University of Louisville, being given a Porsche as a signing bonus from WCW, and being allowed to use Vince McMahon's private limo. What is the point of this fucking angle?
I think we're gonna pivot from the original point because he started to really, really hit on Goldilocks right now.
So that brings us to the true main event, the reason why you pay $10 to this show. Jeff Jarrett being called to the ring by Mike Tenay to cut a promo. Tenay asks him why the fuck is he hitting women with chairs. Jeff continues to not answer questions he is asked. He is cracking up over being the champion. Everyone and their mother is attacking him from behind, wanting title shots. And I mean, he's only defended the belt like 5 times since November. Tenay told him he needs to represent the NWA's world champion, so Jarrett flips out on him. Before he could become violent, Raven's music hit, and he came to ringside with Alexis and Julio. Raven told Jarrett to go ahead and beat up Tenay since this is everything to do with Raven and nothing to do with Jarrett. Raven points out that Jarrett obsesses over the belt, and without it, he wouldn't belong. Jarrett points out that Raven has been to rehab and tells Raven to bring his drug-induced ass into the ring for a fight. A dozen security guards run to the ring to hold Jarrett back. Raven gets on the apron with a chair, so Jarrett gets a chair. Security then flees because how many concussions has he given the security guard since June? Alexis jumps on the apron. Jarrett swings. Alexis ducks. Julio jumps up on the apron. Jarrett swings. Julio ducks. Dusty Rhodes waddles into the ring to talk some sense into the chosen one, but Jarrett, quote unquote, not knowing who it was, gave the Dream a concussion with the chair as the show, much like last week with Alexis, goes off the air 2 seconds after it happened. 1/1000, 2/1000, copyright 2003.
And it had Raven cackling all the while when he hit Dusty.
Yes. Now, do you remember in like 1996 when the Ultimate Warrior randomly wore a hat to the ring during an interview segment and it was a tip off that there was going to be an angle? And that was when Jerry Lawler hit him in the back of the head with a painting to set up their match at King of the Ring 96.
Yeah.
Well, Dusty Rhodes came to the ring with a big ass cowboy hat on. He did not come to the ring wearing a big ass cowboy hat for the hell of it. It was to cushion the blow from the concussion that Jeff Jarrett was trying to give him. And much like the chair shot to Alexis last week, no one gives a fuck about this because the show ended as soon as he did it.
Yep.
And I haven't watched next week's show yet, but I will wager that they don't mention this at all again.
They kind of have to mention it because it's Dusty and it kind of impacts his feud with Eric Watts.
But by the way, Raven's little promo, the 30, 45 seconds he cut his promo, it was great. It was better than last week's. And suddenly it's starting to make sense why this fucking match draws. Because Raven is cutting these great promos when he doesn't get sidetracked by the fans week after week. And people are sick of Jarrett as champion already. And this is going to become a running theme on this show for the rest of the time that people don't fucking want Jarrett to be champion, but he's got the pencil. But that brings us to the end of this week's show. Match quality 3.0 out of 10, because if you take out that main event, take out that 9.0, the rest of the show 2.0, 2.5, 3.5, 0, 4.0, 2.0, 1.0. That main event saved this fucking match, or saved this fucking show from the ultimate shitter. And the Raven promo and the four-way, put the overall enjoyment ranking at a 4.0, because it really tells you how good the Raven promo and the four-way were, since I have given lower scores to shows with more good things on it.
Mm-hmm.
And Future Build 5.0 out of 10, because even though they are doing their best to ruin Raven versus Jarrett, somehow, some way, they are going to draw the best buy rate that TNA does of the weekly pay-per-view era. Plus, at some point, whether it's next week or whenever, we are going to get a full actual tag team match with Triple X versus Jerry Lynn and Amazing Red. And I don't want to say I can't wait, because I'm sure they'll fuck it up somehow, but that hopefully ends up being a really great match.
I hope so too.
So it gives us an overall rating of 4.0 out of 10, which shows you the strength of having two good things at the end of the show, because, arguably you could say last week's show was better, but this week's show got a better overall rating. But any final thoughts on episode number 40?
It's interesting that when you get a match that people want to see and not have the two wrestlers just beat up on each other, kind of actually builds some tension to a match. It's magical. Something you don't
40,
see too often in wrestling nowadays.
40 down, 72 to go. We
Mr.
are.
Surf.
Oh, Lord. So
Sorry, I gotta do
that's
the what's my line reference.
I will take your word for that one. All right, so that does it for this week's show. Thankfully, I don't say we're off for the next 2 weeks, but we are 2 weeks in the can, so we can avoid this show like the plague for 2 weeks until we have to do this again.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, that's going to do it for this week's show. Thank you all for listening. Hope you all enjoyed our descent into madness, and we'll talk to you again in 7 days.
Bye bye.